wizard who'll save Britain and bring the people back to us and the old ways.
It'll be too much for you, man. It'll drain you of what power you still have.
If I don't do it, we'll die. If people stop believing in us, we won't exist. The new religion has already pushed us to the brink. Soon we'll be forgotten.
All things change, sister. It's sad, but heaven, hell, and the world move on. It's fate.
I won't accept it. I'll fight. Will you help me?
No, you forget. I'm the lady of the lake. I'm made of water. Now everything's flowing away from us, and I accept it. I'm sorry, my dear.
Then I'll do it myself.
Then I will do it myself, says Mab, the goddess. Quite a prophetic statement is said here. But who is this Mab? Well, this is a Shakespearean name that was taken from the old British pantheon, who was the son of Modron, Matrona, the mother, the matron. And this goddess was the goddess of all goddesses, the mother of gods and men and mortals. So, if we are to equate this Matrona with the Irish equivalent by wordplay, we would have Maeve, which sounds pretty much like Mob, which probably explains Shakespeare's confusion here. And so this Maeve is from Medwa, the mead intoxication. She was the lunar goddess. So she was the queen of the lunar dynasty of Celtic deities. And in this play here, this is from, this clip here is from the BBC. It's a TV series, a television series on Merlin. So this television clip of Merlin is from the BBC. It's from 1998. And in here we have the struggle between the older gods to regain their godly rule over mortals, which was taken away from them. Mabon is telling the Lady of the Lake, could you help me regain this kingdom, because I plan to create a great powerful wizard who will be the ruler of my people. And in this she's quite similar to Dan or Danu, the mother of the Danans, the Tuatha de Danann, the mother goddess of the Celts. In Brittany she was the holy patron of the British people of Armorica, and also of French Canadians before she was replaced by St. John the Baptist, who had his head chopped off. It's quite a prophecy in itself also, isn't it? But this modern Matrona is back. She's back. And I'll explain to you why she's back. And in this we will see, by going through the different pantheons of the ancient Celts, modern Celts also, how these gods connect, and to what god did the Celtic people give devotion to? To who did they pray? To which god did the Celts pray? Not an easy thing to sort out. So you'll have to bear with me. We'll go through it god by god. Pantheon. Following Julius Caesar's list of the most important deities in the Gallic pantheon, In his list, following this Interpretatio Romana, which is a Roman interpretation that's used to sort and index the deities, which ones were the most important. The list starts off with Mercury. For the Celts, Mercury was the high god, and he was above Jupiter in the way that the common folk gave much more devotion to Mercury than to Jupiter. Jupiter, much like the Brahmin in Hinduism, was not that much celebrated popular-wise, mainly because he was the god of the Druids, and so in that sense it was a bit mystical and theologically complex and difficult for the common folk to grasp why the Druids could not name this god, and why they didn't give a public sacrifice or celebrations to this god. So most evidently Mercury was the god not only of the warriors but also of the everyday tribal members. So unlike Mercury, for the Romans, who was the god of commerce, Lu or Lugus in Gaelic, transcended the entire ethic order and ruled at the top of the pantheon. And in Irish myths, he shares the title of High King, alternatively with his alter ego Nuada, that is Nodens, the Gaelic name for him. And as polytechnician, that is the god of all crafts, there was nothing that was out of his reach, and this is why they called him the long-handed. And Nuada was called the silver-handed because he was the plutocrat, and this is what the name means actually. Lu had a son called Setanta, which means the pathwalker, and this Setanta becomes Cuchulainn, as he was celebrated in the Irish texts. On the continent, Lu had two assessors, who were called the Luguis. The Luguis were his faithful companions, and so we can imagine that one was Apollo and the other one was Mars, and so this gives pretty much the basic feel of it, where they always come in threes, in trios. The gods come in trios, obviously. We'll go on to Mars then. So the Celtic Mars was Agma, most evidently, and he was called Ogmios on the continent, and he belonged to the second social class, and he was the Hercules, the strongman of the gods, and he was known for eloquence, and together with Lugus, along with Apollo, who was otherwise known as Granos on the continent, and the Aungus, the Makok in the islands. He was therefore found in the company, which was the Romans would say that he was in the company of Castor and Pollux, the Dioscuri. And Mars represents all that is dark and troublesome, and he is the equivalent of the Vedic Varuna and the Greek Uranos, and has an inclination for the tantric and magical arts, and coupled with brutal and warlike violent overtones. As Lord of Death, he is the conductor of souls of the departed into the underworld. And on a brighter note, Ogmios was Lord of Poetry, the god of eloquence and of writing, and this is why he is figured as the inventor of the oghams, as Agma in the Irish texts. Owain, the British god Owain is probably a cognate of this god, but it's not of the same etymology as Ogmios or Ogma. It probably comes from Awen, which is Awentos, Ewentos, which means morally just in Old Celtic, and so this Owen was probably the British name for this Ogmios, this Mars. But he is known as Granus in the British Roman epigraphy, and so this Granus comes from Granos, which means bearded, radiant, and solar, in beaming as a solar deity. This explains a bit the aspects of this Mars-Apollo equation. So evidently Granos is also the British Apollo Mars god figure. As these things get more complicated if we, let's say, take them individually as one, but then if you take him as a triune deity, everything drops into place and it makes a lot more sense. And so another one of his names, as attested in Vaucluse, France, epigraphic find is Albiorix. He was a ruler of the universe as Mars. Also, other names were Mars Lucetius, Mars Mebellicus, and Mars Smertius, and these were Roman epithets but with Gaelic names. And so this god is very similar to, let's say, the Vedic Marats, who were also known as wind gods, gods of the storm. And this is where the Roman name Mars, from Marvort, comes. It's from mar, to harvest, and wert, to turn, the harvest and turn the soil. And he was a god of agriculture also, linked to the blazing sun. And so in this way he's also quite similar to the Roman Saturn. So Apollo, this Celtic Apollo, more than just a son or love god, was in the company of Belisama in Gaul, and as god of medicine and healing, he also was known in the Irish text as Dianke. He was therefore also the god of medical physicians. And one of his other names was Belenos, which means the bright. Abellio as the morning sun, which was the true Celtic cognate of the Greek Apollo, which are not necessarily from the same etymological roots. So this, there was this other god related in this group. The Vulcan, let's say the Roman Vulcan, the Welsh equivalent was Gophanon, and the Irish equivalent was Gwebnu, and who was the Danon smith god. And so in Ireland there was the Flead Gofnan, which was the festival in honor of the smith, and other names by which he was known was Cred, and there was a trio of these gods, Cian, Samain, along with this Gobanu. This trio gives many hypostases, avatars. Okay, so then we have Jupiter was referred to as the triple-faced god. He also comes in triads. Jupiter is god of the first order, since he is the companion of the Druids. And as a triune god, he is the creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer of the worlds. Jupiter is also dual in nature, in that he is both light and dark, with Isis, the good, Taranis, the thunder, for the darkening skies. As Isis, he is the equivalent of the Vedic god Mitra, lord of contracts and friendship. His Irish name was Dagda, the good god, and represents all that is clear, pleasant and right, lawful and orderly. And the Gaulish Tutatis or Tutatis is the national father, and has the Irish Olathir, the All-Father, as a cognate. He is the national father and has therefore kingship over gods and mortals. So Olathir, the All-Father, similar to Tutatis. And then you have another one of his epithets is Lir, or Leros, or Lero in Old Celtic, which means the flow, the waves of the ocean. So this connects him to the sea god Neptune, Poseidon, and so this he has a triple aspect also, therefore, as Father, God of devotion. He's always connected with swans, as with Zeus. Then Saturn. Saturn, this god here is not very well defined generally in the Celtic pantheon, and it's very he's very difficult to find. But if you look at the Irish texts, he appears as Partholon, son of Sera, husband of Dealniet, and father Eber and Rudrig. He murders his parents, hoping to inherit their kingdom. Failing to gain the throne, he escapes to Ireland, only to oppose a terrible Fomori chief, who is Kikol Grinkeнгos. He introduces agriculture to Ireland, and two of his companions were the ploughmen, and so Partholon is one of the most misunderstood early characters of mythology. Generally, he's the name is translated by Celtic scholars such as Guyon-Vach and Leroux as stemming from Bartholomeus, that is Bartholomew, son of Ptolemy. But this is a later Christian interpretation of the name. In all likelihood, the name rather derives from an earlier Celtic name which went by the name of Bartoleos or Bardoleos, which means the epic. As for the British myths, he's given as Araun, Lord of Anun, and Araun is the Brittonic name for Areianos, who was the watchman, and Anun is from Amdunam, the underworld. So he was the watchman or the watcher of the underworld, and this is how we can really grasp the nuances of this character, this mythological character. And he's also found in the classical texts. Let's say in Plutarch in Morals mentions that Phaenon, or Saturn, the planet as it was called, was known as Nocturos by the Ogygians, the people of Ireland. And so Nocturos is from the old Celtic Nocturos, which means the nightly, the nocturnal, and the night watchman, the the night watcher. So all of this comes together now. So if we look into the, for further explanation as for the motif into the Irish text, okay, in the four annals we find this passage, Age of the World, year 2520. From the deluge until Partholon took possession of Ireland, 278 years, and the age of the world when he arrived in it, 2520. The age of the world when Partholon came to Ireland, these were the chieftains who were with him, Slane, Leithin, Rudreg, his three sons, Deilneat, Nerba, Ceochba, and Cerbnad, their four wives. So now back to the wives of the gods, the mothers, the goddesses. So Caesar mentions that there was this Minerva, this Celtic Minerva. And who was this Celtic Minerva? The goddess always comes in groups of threes also. And these are termed as the Matrai. We have seen with the Mab Matrona, modern, that this mother god was the mother of mortals also. This goddess was also quite misunderstood. Sometimes the names get confused, as we have seen with Shakespeare, and also the role of this goddess is quite it's probably simpler than we think. As a goddess of sovereignty, she has sovereignty over the world. She looks over the destinies of mortals and men. Therefore, in this situation, she is the fate goddess, the fairy of destiny, of the destiny of men. And she was dual also in nature, as Rhea Venus. She resides in the reddening skies as the aurora. She is the goddess of the mind, of the moon, of the soul. She is the mother of matter, the material world. She is the patroness of the arts. This Minerva is the patroness of the arts, the Aes Dana, as they are called in the Irish texts. So, therefore, she looks over the artisans and she has patronage over them. She is represented by three cranes, or crones, and who are the three fate fairies who reside in the Pleiades, the stars of Taurus. And this is why she's often found accompanied with this waterfowl, and she is therefore the companion of this solar deity, who is also found in the company of bulls. And this is why in May, during the Beltane, bull sacrifices were performed, and this is why Isis, the god Isis, is found in the company of bulls and cranes also. And so the other names for her were, as we have mentioned, Morigu, Rigantona, and Sirona, the Starly. She was the god of the goddess of the heavens. And so she's also known as Brigindu, and she looks over the basic elements of the earth. In Ireland, there's Tailtiu and Futla for the earth. For water, there is Anu, Anna. She looks over sources, and all of the river names bear goddess names, most of them. And also, as goddess of the air, the wind, there's Awentia, Awen, the inspiration, breath. She has the muse of the arts of song and poetry. Fire, of course, being under the tutelage of the god Aed, Aedus in Gaul, who is the god of fire. She's known as Med and Medua, intoxication, as we have seen, and goddess of the moon. And in this she represents the psychic powers, mana, Minmania in the old tongue. And you also have the psychic powers through the matras Sul Segiai or matras Xiul Segiai, the fascinating, hypnotic mothers of the fountains and lakes and sources. Find her as a lady of the lake, of course, in later Arthurian myth. And so there's goddess of the home, Nanto Suelta, companion of Sukelos, a striker, similar to who is an avatar, a hypostasis of Taranis, of course, of the godhead. And so the fairies were called in the old language Sebarai or Sidai in Gaidelic, while the naiads, the nymphs, went by the name of Nixai or Niskai. These were water nymphs. As we have seen, Mab tells the Lady of the Lake that she fears that the gods will die and the mortals will no longer give devotion to them. And the Lady of the Lake replies, "All things must change, sister, heaven and hell. Everything is flowing away from us. We must accept it." And so the goddess does not accept it, and she clings on to the old ways. We know that the new religion, of course, tried very hard to replace the national cults of the Celts by the cult to the Roman Empire, the Imperial Cult. When the Christian Church came in after Constantine, the Church replaced the Imperial Cult with its own. And so the devotions that were given in the first and third social function, as Dumézil would say, were integrated into the new religion. As for the third function, these ones carried on. So in a way, Queen Mab should not fear of disappearing. And we know that the cult to the goddess continued on into the Christian Church. The Church was not able to stamp out this popular devotion. So the Lady of the Lake and all of the other goddesses who were goddesses of the home and of the many places became Our Lady of this and Our Lady of that. And the names of the Lady of the Lake, of course, such as Vivian, also the Lady of the Lake had many names, which were in Britain Nimue and Viviane la Fée. And Viviane was the Latinized name of an older Gallic name, Bivia, Bivia, which meant in Latin the two ways, so she was a goddess of the ways. In the Catholic Church, these goddesses became known as Our Ladies. These many saints were carried on very, very long. So the Church was never able to wipe out the goddess cult, which survived. And this is one of the critiques that are made to Catholics in general by other Christians, is that they are goddess worshippers, which is true. In fact, the Virgin Mary, Maria, is the goddess of the sea, Maria of the sea in Latin. And she was one of the Pleiades. Maya was one of her other names, Maya, the goddess of May. There are other good examples also. Along with Maria, there was Anna, and Anna, of course, was a pagan goddess. She was revered in all of the Celtic countries and even in Rome. The third function devotions did carry on way into the 20th century, and under, of course,
the guise of the Catholic Church, but still these devotions are still popular and still kept in the oral traditions and the everyday popular traditions. When the Virgin Mary appears, she appears as a goddess, and she doesn't appear just as a spirit of some kind, or a lesser spirit, a daemon as the Greeks would call it. She is absolutely a goddess, and in this sense, in many of the Catholic countries, the Virgin Mary or Saint Anne even more popular than Jesus the Christ, and so this tells you a lot about popular devotion and how the third function survived into the Christian era. And of course, many of the typical trades that were under the tutelage of the goddess, which was called Minerva by the Latins, or Brigantia or Brigindo by the Celts, many of these trades were still kept, and the tradesmen were under guilds, and these guilds were under the patronage of Saint Anne, whereas Anna, still going on long after the Druids and the aristocracy fell. Here's how it happened in two parts. First, the Druids are banned by the Roman authorities in the empire, and they're replaced by the Imperial Cult. Then the church takes over and institutes Christianism as the imperial religion, and the aristocrats and knights, the cavaliers, are integrated into the Catholic orders. Of course, this is a bit contradictory, since the Christians were supposed to be peaceful and loving, but they were able to recover many of the dualistic devotions that the aristocrats had in the old traditions. This is what we see with the Arthurian cycles, where we have the Druid represented by Merlin, who is already turned into a wizard, as the Irish would have said, the Druid, a wizard. The Druid became a wizard. Then secondly, the aristocrats, the cavaliers, the knights, they turned their backs to the first function, the Druids, and they become integrated in the royal power that was under Christendom, under Christianity.
Don't you know me, Lord Merlin? Morgana of Cornwall.
You have your father's eyes.
I remember you. When my brother Arthur was born, you came and took him away.
And now you leave his wedding.
Because I'm a creature like you.
What is the stone that burns?
Sulfur, to mix with mercury.
What is that root?
Mandrake. The essence of it can prolong the act of love.
And if too much is taken?
Pain and death. That's it.
Ooh, you do know something of the art. Do you have the sight? Do you see the future?
Sometimes I dream of things that come to pass.
Look now. What do you see? What will be?
I see a castle of silver and gold. Up there.
Oh, that plan is well known. You'll have to do better than that. It's a lonely way, you know, the way of the necromancer. Yes, to know too much. Lacrimae mundi, the tears of the world.
But the power, the joy.
Moments, fleeting moments.
I can ease your loneliness. Let me help you. Teach me.
Ah, the days of our kind are numbered. The one god comes to drive out the many gods. The spirits of wood and stream grow silent. It's the way of things, yes. It's a time for men and their ways.
And on the cult to Apollo, Herodotus had this to say. The Keltoi who dwell along the ocean venerate the Dioscoroi above any of the gods, since they have a tradition handed down from ancient times that these gods appeared among them, coming from the ocean. One of the best recounts of antiquity on the subject of the Apollonian cult is found in Strabo's geography. In the ocean, he says, there is a small island not very far out to sea, situated off the outlet of the Liger River, and the island is inhabited by women of the Semitai, and they are possessed by Dionysus, and make this god propitious by appeasing him with mystic incantations, as well as other sacred performances, and no man sets foot on the island, although the women themselves, sailing from it, have intercourse with the men, and then return again. Let's also note from Diodorus that the twins Dionysus and Apollo were sons of Zeus. Of those who have written about the ancient myths, Hecatius and certain others say that in the region beyond the land of the Celts there lies in the ocean an island no smaller than Sicily. This island, the account continues, is situated in the north and is inhabited by the Hyperboreans, who are called by that name because their home is beyond the point whence the north winds blow. And the island is both fertile and productive of every crop, and since it has an unusually temperate climate, it produces 2 harvests each year. Moreover, the following legend is told concerning it. Leto was born on this island, and for that reason Apollo is honored among them above all other gods, and the inhabitants are looked upon as priests of Apollo. After a manner, since daily they praise this god continuously in song and honor him exceedingly. And there is also on the island both a magnificent sacred precinct of Apollo and a notable temple which is adorned with many votive offerings and is spherical in shape. Furthermore, a city is there which is sacred to this god, and the majority of its inhabitants are players of the cithara, and these continually play on this instrument in the temple and sing hymns of praise to the god, glorifying his deeds. So continuing with Diodorus of Sicily in his Library of History, he writes the following, and a peculiar and striking practice is found among the Upper Celts in connection with the sacred precincts of the gods, and for in the temples and precincts made consecrate in their lands a great amount of gold has been deposited as a dedication to the gods, and not a native of the country ever touches it because of religious scruple, although the Celts are an exceedingly covetous people. And on the event of the full moon, the people of the island of Britain and the continent would travel to Ogygia, Ireland, for a religious pilgrimage to honor the gods Heracles, alias Agma, and Cronus, alias Tartalan. These people consider and call themselves continentals, and the inhabitants of this land islanders, because the sea flows around it and on all sides, and they believe that with the peoples of Cronus there mingled at the time those who arrived in the train of Heracles and were left behind by him, and that this later, so to speak, rekindled again to a strong, high flame the Hellenic spark there, which was already being quenched and overcome by the tongue, the laws and the manners of the barbarians. Therefore Heracles has the highest honors, and Cronus the second. This ranking in popular worship does not contradict Caesar's statement where Mercury and Mars had preference over Jupiter. Saturn, that is Cronus, was not mentioned by him. Now, when at intervals of 30 years the star of Cronus, which we call Phaenon, the splendent, but they, our author said, call Nicturos, night watchman, enters the sign of the bull, they having spent a long time in preparation for the sacrifice and expedition, choose by lot and send forth a sufficient number of envoys in a correspondingly sufficient number of ships, putting aboard a large retinue and the provisions necessary for men who are going to cross so much sea by oar and live such a long time in a foreign land. So according to Plutarch, the Celtic Saturn Nocturus completes the Saturnine cycle of 27 to 29 years as it enters the Taurine constellation. This marks the period for celebrations in honor of Saturn. And as Plutarch further explains, this sea quest for Cronus was accomplished in hope of a prophetic revelation similar to the Delphi oracles. Now when they have put to sea, the several voyagers meet with various fortunes, as one might expect, but those who survive the voyage first put in at the outlying islands, which are inhabited by Greeks, and see the sun pass out of sight for less than an hour over a period of 30 days, and this is right. And this is night, though it has a darkness that is slight, and twilight glimmering from the west. There they spend 90 days, regarded with honor and friendliness as holy men, and so addressed, and then winds carry them across to their appointed goal. Nor do any others inhabit it but themselves and those who have been dispatched before them. For while those who have served the god together for the stint of 30 years are allowed to sail off home, most of them usually choose to settle in the spot, some out of habit and others because without toil or trouble they have all things in abundance, while they constantly employ their time in sacrifices and celebrations, or with various discourse and philosophy, for the nature of the island is marvelous as it is the softness and circumambient air. Some, when they intend to sail away, are even hindered by the divinity which presents itself to them as it intimates and friends, not in dreams but only by means of omens. But many also come upon the visions and the voices of spirits manifest, for Cronus himself sleeps confined in a deep cave of rock that shines like gold. The sleep of Zeus has contrived like a bond for him, and birds flying in over the summit of the rock bring ambrosia to him, and all the island is suffused with fragrance scattered from the rocks as from a fountain, and those spirits mentioned before tend to serve Cronus, having been his comrades the what time he ruled as king other gods and men. Many things they do foretell of themselves, for they are oracular, but the prophecies that are greatest and of greatest matters they come down and report as dreams of Cronus. For all that Zeus premeditates, Cronus sees in his dreams, and the titanic affections and notions of his soul make him rigidly tense until sleep restores his repose once more, and the royal and divine element is all by itself pure and unallowed.